What would you risk to do the right thing? When a quiet nurse breaks hospital rules to help a wounded veteran who has no insurance, her life is turned upside down. No one expected a 4-star general to walk through the doors hours later, asking for her by name. What follows is not just a story about rules and consequences, but a national reckoning with compassion, dignity, and the cost of silent courage. Now, journey into the true power of one woman's decision, and discover how a single act of kindness changed an entire system from the inside out. She cleaned the infected wound and administered antibiotics. No paperwork, no formal intake, just quiet compassion. That's why they suspended her. At least that's what the manager said after Nurse Claire Morgan treated a struggling veteran the system had left behind. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She simply removed her badge, placed it gently on the desk, and walked out of the hospital she had served for nearly 11 years. 3 hours later, the silence of the hospital lobby shattered as the elevator doors opened with a metallic screech. A 4-star general stepped out. He wasn't lost. He was looking for someone. "Where can I find Nurse Claire Morgan?" he asked. "If you think doing the right thing will never cost you your job, you've never stood where Claire stood." Claire Morgan, 36, had been the quiet backbone of Riverside General Hospital for over a decade. She wasn't the loudest, the flashiest, or the one with the most plaques on the wall, but she was the one who treated every patient with the same respect, whether they wore a suit, rags, or military fatigues. That Wednesday afternoon, an older black man limped into the ER lobby. Skin weathered by sun, clothes frayed, eyes scanning for something solid. His name was Walter Briggs, and his keychain still bore the worn tag U.S. Army. His jeans were torn at the calf, revealing a deep, inflamed gash, angry, swollen, and untreated. The receptionist glanced up, barely. "No insurance," she muttered under her breath. Claire heard that, but what she heard louder was what no one else did, the cry for help buried in the man's silence. When the head nurse shook her head and said, "He's not in the system," Claire responded softly but firmly, "Then I'll step out of the system with him." She took her own lunch bag, pulled out a granola bar, grabbed the emergency kit, and knelt beside Walter. She cleaned the wound, disinfected it, applied antibiotics, packed it with ice, and handed him the snack. Walter tried to push her hand away. "Ma'am, I don't want to be a burden." Claire smiled. "You carried this country on your back. Let somebody carry you today." His eyes didn't cry, but they held a desert's worth of pain, dry, burned, and nearly forgotten. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're not invisible," she said, bandaging the wound. "But you sure can't walk out of here on that leg." The next morning they called her in. She didn't need to be told what it was about. "You administered medication without a chart," the director said. "It's a violation." "I helped a soldier who fought for our flag," she replied. "You're suspended pending investigation." She stood tall, even as the hallway outside suddenly felt colder than any ER shift. She packed her things in silence, 10 years of service reduced to a meeting and a printed form. Outside, the sun felt too bright. She walked to her car with no badge, no send-off, no applause. Inside, she whispered to herself, "I'd do it again." Walter's voice echoed in her heart. "Thank you." That night, the quiet of her apartment felt unfamiliar. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at old nursing textbooks. All those chapters on ethics and emergency protocols, none of them ever taught her what to do when rules demanded she look away from someone in need. She made tea, let it cool. Whispers began. A few texts from co-workers. Some said, "We're with you." Most said nothing, and then someone posted about it online. Nurse suspended for helping a homeless veteran. It spread like wildfire. Comment after comment lit up the screen. "This is why we lose the best people." "My dad served. I salute this woman. She's a hero." "Fire the people who made this decision, not her." If he wore a suit and had private insurance, they would have rolled out a warm towel. Riverside General said nothing. No press release, no apology, just silence. Claire sat on her porch, trying not to cry. Her phone buzzed constantly, messages from nurses, veterans, and total strangers. One stood out. "I'm told me what you did. You don't know me, but I know him. I'm coming." No name, no number, just that. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, the administration doubled down. Manager Richard Hale barked, "We can't reward those who break protocol. This is about structure, not sentiment." But structure began to crack. At 6:14 IMM the next day, the elevator pinged. A man in a crisp military uniform, 4 silver stars on his shoulders, stepped into the lobby. The guard stood frozen. "How can I help you, sir?" He didn't look at them. "Air for Nurse Claire Morgan." The whispers turned to roars. Phones rang. Break rooms emptied. Eyes followed the general's boots as he walked the halls of Riverside. Hale scrambled downstairs, tie askew. "General, may I ask what—" "I'm here to make an official statement," the general replied calmly. "By sundown, this suspension won't just be a hospital matter. It will be a national one." And it was. Veterans across the region flooded the hospital's phones. "Did you really turn away one of our own? Is this how you treat us now?" Front desk staff, once firm, now stammered through their scripts. Claire's neighbor, a retired teacher, dropped off a hot meal. "My husband served in Korea," she whispered. "When he came home limping, someone like you helped him. Didn't ask for documents." Claire's voicemail was full. Her inbox, too. A journalist called 4 times. Private clinics offered her new jobs, each beginning with the same words: "We saw what you did." Back at Riverside, the morale was crumbling. Breaks ran long, charts went unfinished, a quiet rebellion filled the halls. One supervisor wore an American flag pin in violation of uniform policy. A resident taped a note above the time clock: "Compassion is not a violation." Manager Hale convened an emergency meeting. "This isn't about veterans," he insisted. "It's about procedures." A hand raised in the back. "What are we protecting ourselves from, sir?" a nurse asked. "Compassion?" Manager Hale didn't even glance at her when she left. But later that evening, something odd happened. His favorite coffee mug, the one with the gold-lettered 1, administrator, mysteriously vanished from his office. That night, long after the janitorial staff had gone home, Hale sat alone in the CLA personnel file review room. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a clinical glow on the screen in front of him. 10 years of service, perfect evaluations, the highest patient satisfaction score in the hospital, not a single complaint or disciplinary warning. Claire Morgan's file was as clean as her conscience. Then his phone rang. "Is the chairman of the hospital board." "Rick," he began, voice tight. "This story is spreading fast. Veterans groups are mobilizing. I just got a call from a congressman's aide." "She broke protocol," Hale said, trying to hold his ground. "It's in black and white." "Then maybe it's time to re-examine the black and white," the chairman replied. "Fix this before it buries us." Hale didn't sleep. By morning he had drafted a carefully worded press release, cold, bureaucratic, and vague. It justified the suspension while quietly promising to review emergency care policies for veterans in light of recent events. Nobody was impressed, not even him. At 8:30 sharp, his assistant knocked. Her face was pale. "There's a government vehicle parked outside," she whispered. "Black SUV, federal plates, flags." Hale rushed to the window. A sleek SUV had pulled up to the main entrance. A uniformed driver stood at attention. "Who is it?" Hale asked, throat dry. "They're asking for Nurse Claire Morgan," the assistant replied. "And they mentioned your name." He straightened his tie, told himself to stay composed, but when the elevator chimed again and the general stepped out, the air seemed to vanish from the room. General Thomas Avery stood tall and solemn in the center of the hospital lobby. His voice was steady and unmistakable. "I'm General Thomas Avery," he announced, "and I served alongside the man your nurse helped, Walter Briggs." He paused. The room froze. "Walter saved my life in Kandahar, twice." A soft murmur rippled through the staff clustered nearby. Hale's throat tightened. Hell, didn't come here asking for attention, he just needed antibiotics and dignity, the general continued. Your nurse gave him both. He turned to the front desk, his tone sharpened. I understand you turned him away because he didn't have insurance. When I was bleeding out from a roadside bombing, Walter Briggs didn't ask for my coverage number. He didn't check my ID, he just ran through bullets, without a helmet, without armor, just loyalty. The general's voice stayed calm, but his presence filled the entire room. His eyes burned, not with rage, but with the quiet fire of righteous memory. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed document. This letter, he said, raising it, is addressed to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. He reached again, this time retrieving a smaller envelope. And this one is for Nurse Claire Morgan. Hale stirred nervously. General, this is highly irregular. General Avery gave him a long, deliberate look. Who's punishing compassion? He then turned toward a young nurse at the nearby station. Where is she? The nurse gestured toward the window. She's outside, sir, sitting on the curb. Without a word, Avery strode out of the ER and into the sunlight. Claire sat hunched at the edge of the sidewalk, arms wrapped around her knees. She looked up when she heard the boots approach, blinking in disbelief. The general stopped in front of her and gave a crisp salute. Ms. Morgan, he said solemnly, may I thank you properly? Claire stood slowly, unsure what to say. I'm not a soldier, she said quietly. No, Avery replied, eyes softening. But you reminded us all why we fought. He handed her the envelope. Inside, an invitation to speak at the National Medical Ethics Summit and an offer to serve as the Regional Emergency Response Liaison for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Behind them, the media had arrived, cameras flashing, reporters scrambling. But Claire's gaze remained locked on the man before her, the only one who had said what needed to be said. You saw him, Avery said, when no one else did. And for the first time since that cold corridor meeting, Claire Morgan smiled. Not with pride, but with peace. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. Claire picked up the phone but didn't say a word. Her eyes stayed locked on the emergency room doors behind him. Have they changed? She asked quietly. Avery didn't hesitate. Only when someone like you walks back in. For a moment, the entire world seemed to pause. Inside the security booth, even the camera feed looked frozen, every figure behind the glass still, every breath held. Administrator Hale stood silently beside the nurse's station, his eyes fixed on the floor. His title, once commanding, now felt paper-thin against the weight of the general's uniform and the quiet gravity of moral truth. The issue wasn't about procedures anymore, it was about purpose, a system that had forgotten the people it was built to protect. Avery turned to face the growing crowd. Walter Briggs, he announced, his voice carrying through every hallway, returned home from 3 deployments. He carries more shrapnel in his body than some museums display in their cases. He paused. No one spoke. Walter never asked for thanks. He didn't seek medals. When that infection set in, he waited 5 days before seeking help, not because he didn't need it, but because he was trained to endure, not to inconvenience. Claire looked down at the envelope in her hand, fingers trembling slightly. I don't understand, she whispered. Why? All this? Why me? Avery's voice softened. Because this isn't just about you. This happens everywhere. Good people being punished for doing what's right. Someone has to say enough. Someone has to draw the line. Inside, Hale began to move toward them. General Avery, he said carefully. May I speak with you, in private? The general didn't flinch. No, sir, he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. If you have something to say, say it in front of everyone. A heavy silence fell. Hale's eyes drifted to the hospital's mission statement, etched across the glass behind him. Healing with integrity. It glared back at him now, an accusation. He turned toward Claire. Nurse Morgan, he said, clearing his throat, Your suspension has been lifted." A single clap echoed from the back, then another, but the applause faltered, polite, hesitant. It didn't feel like victory. "That's not enough," Avery replied, his voice like stone. "Lifting a punishment is not the same as admitting it should never have happened." Hale's shoulders sagged. "What do you want from me?" Avery stepped forward. "Start by saying the truth, that the failure wasn't hers, it was the system's, a system that forgot its purpose." Claire remained seated, the envelope still unopened. More people gathered. Staff, patients, pedestrians from the sidewalk. Word had spread, and now the courtyard was full of eyes, waiting. Then, quietly, a familiar figure stepped forward. Walter Briggs. No limp, no cane. The infection had healed. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He simply stood beside Claire, shoulder to shoulder. Hale looked between the three of them. General, veteran, nurse. He had spent 23 years defending policy, protecting structure, upholding chain of command. But right now, in this moment, he couldn't remember why any of that mattered. "I'm sorry," he finally said, "to both of you. Somewhere along the way, I forgot something important." Claire rose, brushing the dust off her jeans. "Sue, what now?" Avery smiled. "That depends on what's in that envelope." 2 weeks later, a new sign appeared just outside the ER entrance. "If compassion comes before protocol, we welcome it." Claire never gave interviews, she never sought the spotlight, but when she returned, she wore a new badge, Veterans Care Liaison Officer, a role created just for her. Walter came by every Thursday, always with 2 coffees, always with a small American flag which he'd place on the corner of the reception desk without a word. One afternoon, a young nurse whispered to him, pointing discreetly at Claire. "Is that her, the woman from the story?" Walter didn't even look up. "She's not a story," he said softly. "She's a reminder." And now, every veteran who walks through the doors of Northgate Hospital sees a sign mounted above the triage desk, written in bold, unwavering letters. "You are not forgotten. You are not alone. Welcome home." The story didn't fade. It spread like spring wind through dry leaves, reaching corners no one expected. Hospitals across the state began re-examining their emergency protocols. Newsrooms picked it up. Advocacy groups rallied. Then came something bigger. A state senator introduced new legislation, the Claire Morgan Act, guaranteeing veterans immediate access to emergency care, insurance or not. No more waiting, no more excuses, just care. 3 months after that unforgettable day with General Avery, Claire walked down the familiar hospital corridor. But she was no longer invisible. Her new uniform bore a revised crest, Northgate Medical on one side, Department of Veterans Affairs on the other. It wasn't for show. It was a promise fulfilled. Even Administrator Hale had quietly stepped away from policymaking. The wave had been too strong, and maybe, deep down, he knew it was time. 6 hospitals across the network had adopted updated veteran care protocols. The shift was no longer controversial, it was necessary. Her new office had once been a storage closet. Now sunlight streamed in through a new window. The desk stayed cluttered. Not with paperwork, but with questions, ideas, and visitors. Veterans came to thank her. Young nurses came to learn. Doctors sought her insight. She had become what the system didn't know it needed, a moral compass with a stethoscope. And General Avery? He kept his promise. The envelope he had handed her that day held more than a job title. It contained a blueprint, a vision for what veteran care could look like. Claire took it seriously, but never loudly. She worked with the kind of calm that people don't question, only follow. Then one rainy Tuesday, exactly 4 months to the day since Walter Briggs limped through the ER doors, Claire returned to her desk and found a package waiting for her. Inside was a frame for her old badge, and beside it, a note, written in a hand that needed no signature. "Some rules are made to be broken. Thank you for knowing which ones." That same afternoon, a nervous young resident caught her outside room 7. "I have a Marine," he said. "No insurance, the VA called. They're 2 hours out. Protocol says I'm supposed to transfer him. But his vitals, they're dropping." Claire smiled gently. "What does your gut tell you?" The resident looked at the chart, then at her. "Treat him now," he said. "Stabilize first. Everything else can wait." Claire turned to go. Then he called after her, voice uncertain. "But what if I get in trouble?" She paused, turned back, and with the same quiet courage that had once cost her a badge and now built her a legacy, she replied, "Then I'll call the general." The hallway was quiet again, save for the hum of the overhead lights and the faint shuffle of shoes against waxed linoleum. Claire stood still for a moment, watching the young resident disappear into room 7. He didn't look back, but something about his stride had changed. Straighter, firmer, as if permission had been granted, not just by authority, but by conscience. She turned and walked slowly back to her office. The rain tapped lightly against the window, a quiet rhythm that felt like punctuation to the events of the past 4 months. Northgate Hospital had changed, but not in the way politicians or press releases would ever fully capture. It wasn't the new signage or updated protocols that mattered most. It was the air. The nurses carried themselves differently. The doctors consulted one another with more patience. The security guards, even the ones who once dismissed certain patients with a glance, now lingered a beat longer before judgment. There was a new language being spoken, unwritten but understood. Compassion had returned to the building, and it had returned not with fanfare, but with a woman who refused to look away from a bleeding man. Claire sat down at her desk, the framed badge resting beneath a small ceramic plant one of the residents had given her as a thank you. She hadn't gotten around to naming it yet. She wasn't much of a plant person, too many unpredictable schedules, too little sunlight, but this one was surviving, even thriving. She opened her email. 2 more invitations to speak at conferences. Another request to advise on a policy revision for veteran triage standards. Her name, once just a line on a shift schedule, now carried unexpected weight. But what touched her most weren't the professional offers. It was the messages from strangers. A nurse from Michigan who had been reprimanded for giving an unhoused teenager a warm blanket in the middle of winter. A physician's assistant from Arizona who had been asked to apologize for emotional overreach after staying past her shift with a grieving family. A Vietnam veteran in Maine who had been turned away from a clinic but said he cried when he read about Claire. They were stories, and in their raw honesty they formed something far more powerful than a movement. They were a reminder of how many people in healthcare walk the razor's edge between policy and morality every day, and how rare it was for someone to step over that line and live to see the system change behind them. That Sunday, Claire returned to the little community church she had once stopped attending, not out of cynicism but fatigue. She sat in the back, hands resting in her lap as the preacher spoke about the Good Samaritan. She'd heard the parable 100 times, but this time something caught her differently. Not the man on the side of the road, not the religious officials who passed him by. But the moment the Samaritan stopped, the decision didn't come with a trumpet or declaration, just a simple pause. A look. A human moment that broke protocol. Claire thought of Walter. He hadn't seen him in a few weeks. His regular visits had tapered, probably because he didn't want to become the veteran from the news. He wanted to be a person again, not a symbol, and she respected that. But as if summoned by thought alone, she found a handwritten note waiting for her the next day. "Sometimes I wonder if survival was the real test, not the war. But if people like you are the reward for staying alive, I passed. W.F." She tucked the note in her drawer, beside the first letter from Avery. One evening, as golden light slanted through her office window, a young intern named Marisol knocked gently on the door. She was nervous, barely in her 20s, fresh from school, her badge still gleaming like a medal. "I wanted to ask you something," she said. Claire motioned for her to sit. "How do you know when a rule is worth breaking?" Claire smiled, leaning back slightly. "You don't," she said honestly. Not always, but your gut will tell you when someone is more important than the policy. Marisol nodded slowly. Is that how you knew? Claire took a long breath. I didn't know I'd be right, I just knew I'd be wrong if I didn't act. What the Claire Morgan story means now. Stories like Claire's don't come around often. Not because there's a shortage of good people, but because most acts of courage happen quietly, beneath fluorescent lights and unspoken rules. They're not televised. They're not trending. But they matter. They matter because we live in a world that often confuses procedure with principle and compliance with compassion. Claire's story is not just about a nurse and a veteran. It's about every person who's ever had to choose between kindness and consequence. It's about the cost of doing the right thing and the rare, powerful moments when doing so actually changes the landscape. This is not a feel-good fairy tale, it's a blueprint for moral courage. 5 lessons from Claire's story that stay with us. Integrity is not always loud. Claire didn't raise her voice. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't retaliate. She acted with quiet conviction, and that made her power undeniable. Systems are built by people and can be changed by them. Policy is not nature, it's design, and flawed designs can be redesigned. Claire didn't overthrow the system, she made it pause, reflect, and rewrite itself. Authority can be earned, not just assigned. Claire had no formal power when she made her decision, but she became the voice others followed because truth resonates louder than hierarchy. Veterans deserve more than ceremonies. Walter Briggs didn't need a parade, he needed antibiotics. What he received from Claire wasn't charity, it was justice. Compassion is not optional. In professions built on care, healthcare, education, public service, compassion is not a bonus feature, it is the cornerstone. A year later, Northgate Hospital named its new wing the Claire Morgan Veterans Urgent Care Center. Claire asked them not to. She didn't want her name on the building, but the board overruled her gently. We're not doing it for recognition, they said. We're doing it for direction. Claire attended the ribbon cutting, standing beside Walter, Avery, and Marisol, who had since completed her residency and now led her own nursing team. Cameras flashed, speeches were made, but the moment that mattered came afterward. A little boy, no more than 10, tugged at Claire's coat. He was holding his grandfather's hand, a man in a wheelchair with a folded Marine Corps cap in his lap. Are you the lady who made the hospital kind again? The boy asked. Claire knelt down, eye level with him. No, she said gently. We all did. And in that reply was the deepest truth of all, that courage isn't an act, it's a ripple. And when it touches the right hearts, it becomes a wave. If you ever wonder whether decency still has a place in modern life, it does. If you ever question whether one act of humanity can matter, it can. And if you ever doubt whether you, yes, you can be the one who changes the room, remember Claire, because the most powerful kind of leadership doesn't shout. It sees, it kneels, and it acts. Even when the system says no.